Thank you very much, Lisa, for that wonderful introduction. It's just such a pleasure to be here today, and I have to say I am very honored to be asked to give this important annual address to the Canadian Women's Foundation. And I'd like to thank Sheila for giving me this opportunity. Sheila and I met on Mars, and that's not the planet, by the way. Certainly, she's someone you'd expect to meet on a planet like Mars, but Sheila and I met on a board for entrepreneurship, and I have to say I was inspired. So when she called me, it was a no-brainer to say yes. And this morning, she inspired all of us. Sheila, thank you very much for your leadership. I've called my address Living with Purpose, because I believe that discovering one's purpose lies at the very crux of one's life. It's not always easy to discover one's purpose. And whenever I think about this question, I am reminded of a moment from the old but still great Peanut comic strip. In this one, Charlie Brown and Linus are standing on the deck of a cruise ship. Charlie is explaining to Linus that some passengers like to position their deck chairs looking forward to see where they are heading, while other passengers position their deck chairs looking toward the stern so they could see where they had been. As Linus ponders how this might all relate to one's philosophy in life, Charlie Brown confesses that his own dilemma in life is that he cannot figure out how to unfold the deck chair. So how exactly does one unfold one's deck chair? It begins, I believe, with a deep understanding of where one has been. So let me begin by taking you back to how I unfolded my deck chair, to my roots and my birthplace, to a country now known as Sri Lanka, but then was called Ceylon. This story begins long before my birth, and you'll be out in about 25 minutes. I'm not going to take all morning. In 1895, a young Canadian woman, Dr. Mary Irwin, traveled to Ceylon from Elora, Ontario. She was trained as a doctor and came as a medical missionary. This was unusual for any woman at that time. But her story was particularly unusual because she had married a Sri Lankan man in New York named Dr. Samuel Ratnam. That man was my great-grandfather's brother. The Ceylon that Mary Ratnam encountered troubled her a great deal. She found that women had few rights, limited access to education. Literacy rates for women were less than 3%. My great-great-aunt discovered how she could make a difference by improving conditions for rural and urban women. Her feminist activism in conservative colonial Ceylon was quite astounding. She focused on women's health, opening up the first family planning clinic and a hospital for women. She promoted the importance of hygiene and mentored the first generation of female doctors. That's not all. She also led the charge for women's right to vote and founded several organizations for girls and women to promote literacy, learning, and opportunities for women. In 1958, at the age of 85, Mary Irwin Ratnam was awarded the prestigious Asian Magsaysay Award for her outstanding contribution to public service. When she passed away in 1962, her official obituary read, and I quote, "Canada has sent many daughters to Ceylon, but the greatest gift was Dr. Mary Ratnam, who inspired and awakened the women of Ceylon, unquote. When I see the Canadian Women's Foundation's vision and mission statement, I immediately think of Mary Ratnam. I can easily imagine her standing shoulder to shoulder with you as you work to invest in the power of women and the dreams of girls. Certainly, there is no question that Mary Ratnam's pioneering contributions to my homeland rippled through generations and made my girlhood dreams possible. Because my father was strongly influenced by Mary Ratnam, whom he called Aunt May, having spent many months at her home when his parents were away on work in India. He always encouraged me to pursue my passions. So when I announced happily in grade 8 that I was going to be an engineer, he didn't say, "Are you crazy? Women don't become engineers." Instead, he and my mother supported my decision enthusiastically. To me, Mary Ratnam represents all the best qualities of leadership. She showed me what it means to live and lead with purpose. She had vision, she had ambition, and she had courage. And she used them to create organizations and to change society so that other girls and women would also be able to find and express their potential. I like to think that I've inherited a few qualities from my great-great-aunt. As president of the University of Alberta, and throughout my career as an academic, I too have been motivated to create the right conditions for others to learn, uncover their purpose, and strive to fulfill their potential. So how did I get to this point? I think it goes back to vision, to ambition, and to courage. Those qualities that underpin a purposeful life. Let me begin with vision. I have a vision of how I can contribute to this world that is shaped by values that are deeply rooted in my life experience and the people who first gave it shape. Margaret Lawrence, the great Canadian writer, once said, and I quote, "The world you were a child in stays with you all the days of your life. Its light is the light you see by, and its dark colors all of your days," unquote. From my earliest memories, my parents encouraged excellence. My father would talk endlessly about Nobel Prizes and Olympic medals. And although as kids we would giggle whenever he started thinking, because it was clear he was never going to win either. My mother, on the other hand, was a real people person and introduced us to stories, both mythical and real, through books and an interest in the lives of people around us. And my grandmother was another important figure in my life. On the one hand, her home was called Fairy Hall, and she had a rich imagination and encouraged us to be creative. On the other hand, she was a busybody, constantly involved in various volunteer activities, one of which was the Women's International Club, started by her mother, a place where women gathered to discuss current issues to take action. So excellence, creativity, and connection with people form the very foundation of who I am. When I discovered a passion for mathematics and physics, I started to envision the particular way in which I could make my own contribution. Pretty early on, I made the connection that my passions and aptitudes could be put to good use in the field of engineering. I was intrigued by the notion of inventing and building technologies that could improve the quality of life. Hence my declaration at age 13 that I would become an engineer. I had no idea really what engineers did, and ignorance has never stopped me from attempting something. Hence my becoming president of University of Alberta. In so many ways, my childhood was ideal. I lived, after all, in a tropical paradise. Sri Lanka was filled with warm and caring people, and I benefited from the sense of extended family and community I grew up with, sometimes absent in our modern lives. But that paradise was spoiled by ethnic conflict and civil war. I witnessed firsthand the ravages of racial and religious intolerance in the 1958 race riots that sent Sri Lanka into decades of civil strife. At the age of 6, my family and I nearly lost our lives on the road from the southern town of Galle to Colombo. That frightening night left me deeply conscious of the need to eradicate intolerance and bigotry from our midst. So along with excellence, creativity, and family, I came to value diversity, tolerance, and community, and developed a strong conviction that problems can be solved and lives can be improved if these values take precedence. That's my vision. Now let me go on to ambition. Ambition is a force that pushes us to achieve our vision and to go after goals that are both challenging and inspiring. Vision calls us to do great things, but it's ambition that makes that possible, to do more than we can imagine ourselves achieving. After graduation, I wanted to explore the world. So I married a fellow engineer at 23 and went to the University of California, Davis, where my husband and I were graduate students completing master's degrees. My stay in the US nurtured my sense of freedom and boldness, but it was in immigrating to Canada and settling here in 1977 that launched me on the next stage of my journey. In Canada, my ambition was to go back to school and complete a doctorate in engineering. So in 1977, when I began my PhD at UBC, there were no women professors in engineering and only a handful of female graduate students. There were also no women's washrooms in the building. And this one graduate student kept going into the men's washroom because that way she thought eventually, then they eventually converted it actually into a women's washroom because she kept showing up. Those were heady times for women. In 1977, Rosalind Sussman Yalow, a medical physicist, won the Nobel Prize in Physiology and Medicine for discovering a method called the radioimmunoassay to measure antibodies in the immune system. She was a physicist and only the 5th woman to win a Nobel Prize. Great female political leaders were emerging everywhere, and the women's revolution had taken hold. Mrs. Bandaranaike of Sri Lanka became the first woman prime minister in the world in 1961, after her husband was assassinated. By 1977, when I started my PhD, Indira Gandhi has been Prime Minister of India for 11 years. Golda Meir had been Prime Minister of Israel from 1969 to 1973. 1979, Margaret Thatcher, daughter of a Grantham shopkeeper, was elected Prime Minister of Britain, a position she held until 1990, making her the longest-serving Prime Minister in 150 years. Change was in the air, from the Far East to the Near West. Women were beginning to confront their twin roles in life. So was I. In addition to a passion for engineering and for intellectual advancement, my biological clock was not just ticking, it was screaming. So emboldened by the freedom I experienced and by the events unfolding around me, I decided I would do both. I would start my PhD at UBC, and we would start our family in the middle of my doctorate. And I have to tell you, when I went to get signed up for my doctorate, the head of the department said to me, "Now you're not going to get pregnant, are you?" "No," I said. Can you imagine someone asking you that today? So I did succeed in earning my doctorate with a pregnancy, and I have 2 wonderful children. However, the journey along the way was not always easy. And by any means, it wasn't easy, and we encountered rough seas. I put in long, long hours at work and at home, juggling career ambitions, family, and the academic imperative to publish or perish. There were times when I wondered whether it was all worth it, especially when my marriage ended, as a result of the clash of visions, of juggling vocation with family life. But now, looking back, filtered through the softness of time, I would not have sacrificed having children for my academic career or sacrificed my work to have children. Each enriched the other. My children provide me and their father with enormous joy. They are grown adults now, but as children they often taught me humility and gave me wisdom. When my daughter was in elementary school, she was asked, "What work does your mother do?" She answered, "My mother? She doesn't work, she just talks." It's really true now. Although the goals I set for myself appeared daunting in 1977, my vision and ambition helped drive them forward. There have been times, however, when vision and ambition were not enough. Courage was often the critical factor. Indeed, if I had not been able to summon up courage at some critical points in my life, I would not be here today. Courage is about overcoming self-doubt and fear, real and imagined. Thankfully, you can strengthen your courage through practice. As Eleanor Roosevelt said, do something that scares you every day. I'm not sure when I first heard this quote, but I certainly took it to heart. And never stop believing in yourself. Margaret Lawrence said, know that although in the eternal scheme of things you are small, you are also unique and irreplaceable, as are all your fellow human beings everywhere in the world. Or as Oscar Wilde put it most succinctly, be yourself. Everyone else is already taken. When I was 13, I may have had a strong sense of myself as an engineer, but when it came right down to it, in the days before I had to begin university, I was petrified. I was afraid. I was afraid I would be the only woman in the class of engineers. I was afraid I would fail. I was afraid I might not like it after all. My father and mother, but particularly my father, would have none of that. He went with me to the National Council of Higher Education to find out how many women would be in my class. To my relief, there were 11 other women set to enroll. None of my fears came true. In fact, quite the opposite. The 12 of us girls became known as the Dirty Dozen. And I did not fail, and neither did they. We all thoroughly enjoyed engineering. It was nice to be in a class with so many dates potential. So this gave me the courage to take the next step and the next. In my professional life, mentorship by colleagues and friends have boosted my courage. I was most fortunate to have had a wonderful PhD supervisor, Keith Bremercombe, who was actually born and raised in Rosalind, Alberta. How many of you know where Rosalind, Alberta is? Wonderful man, sadly passed away a few years ago. He not only taught me how to be bold and courageous, but also how to nurture human relationships with care and compassion. He gave me the courage to be both a mother and an academic. As a young professor, I often had to confront my fears when I was invited to consult for steel companies to learn about the engineering problems in production, as well as to give advice. This was challenging. I felt out of place in steel plants, where there were no women. I had to trudge around in steel-toed boots and a hard hat, close to large 250-ton vessels of molten steel at temperatures of over 1,500 degrees centigrade. But soon, the exhilaration of translating my research into practical outcomes overshadowed my fears. The men in steel companies were mostly respectful. It was fun. I travel to companies around the world. What a privilege. In those times when I need to summon my courage, I often look to the lives and accomplishments of others. I look around me and often see numerous so-called ordinary men and women leading courageous, inspiring lives. Tonight, for instance, I will be going back to Edmonton to celebrate our annual Alumni Award ceremony, something I do every year. Among the many inspiring stories I have heard at these ceremonies, there's one that stands out for its elements of remarkable courage. It involves a tiny African woman named Shirley Hopkinson. When Shirley was a young mother and teacher in her homeland of Guyana, she was awarded a Guyanese government scholarship to go to University of Alberta for graduate school. She was thrilled until she realized that she would have to leave her family of 3 young children behind. With tremendous courage, she came to Canada anyway, and through 1 million daily acts of courage, she completed her studies. Today, Shirley is a principal and an award-winning elementary educator in inner city Washington, D.C. There, she's inspired a whole generation of students to commit acts of courage of their own. Where once they performed at the lowest levels of proficiency, they are now at the highest. That's the kind of leadership that's born out of vision, ambition, and courage. That's the kind of leadership that Mary Ratnam showed. And that's the kind of leadership that I see guiding the work of the Canadian Women's Foundation. The work that this foundation does is critically important, both in terms of its impact on individual girls' and women's lives and its impact on our broader society. In fact, just yesterday I saw in the newspaper that Canada was ranked the 3rd best country in the world to be a woman, according to rankings compiled by the US website. We only trail Iceland and Sweden. I have a feeling that the Canadian Women's Foundation has been such an important contributor to that outstanding result. But our work is not done by any measure. We are we are a nation of a small population. We need the input and talent of every one of our young people, young men and women alike, to maintain our exceptional quality of life. We need their energy and innovative ideas to enrich and enhance Canada's reputation as a leader in the global community. Foundations such as yours and institutions such as the University of Alberta, where I am president, are partners in this vital endeavor. In different but compatible ways, we are both focused on ensuring that the right conditions exist for every individual to find their own particular purpose in life. We are both working to create opportunities that empower individuals and provide the opportunities in which unique talents and skills blossom, ambitions grow, and courage abounds. At the U of A, we are guided by a promise made by our founding president, Henry Marshall Tory. The modern university, he proclaimed, should exist for the uplifting of the whole people. That might seem rather a tall order. But when you consider that the uplifting of the whole people always begins with the action of only one person, like Shirley Hopkinson or Mary Ratnam, and that the actions of only one person have the capacity to improve the lives of so many others, then you begin to see what Tory meant. When I was first offered the position of president, I was terrified of the responsibility, but filled with a tremendous sense of privilege. People ask me, now that you're president, how do you sleep at night? And I said, like a baby, I wake up every hour and cry. What's a privilege is that I'm in a position to create a vision, and by inspiring others with ambition and courage to make a real difference in the faculty, students, and staff of the university, and to the many external communities which are depending on the university to deliver on its core mission of excellence in education and research. If I have been able to do so, it is because of two reasons. The first, I believe that we are all obligated to improve the predicament of fellow human beings, to recognize what a privilege it is to live in a free society and to live life with a purpose. And second is that I have found that so many others, like all of you gathered here today, are walking lockstep with me, equally committed to doing what needs to be done to make this world a better one for everyone. Thank you very much.